Every empire believes it can tax its way to safety. Every ruler swears the burden is temporary, a small price to keep the system alive. But history disagrees. From Rome to the Ottomans, from Spain to the Soviet Union, the same pattern repeats. Power expands, spending explodes. And when the bills come due, rulers do what they always do. They reach deeper into their citizens' pockets until there's nothing left to take. Because no empire dies poor. It dies from the illusion that it can always take more. Taxes built empires, armies, roads, monuments, but they also hollowed them out from within. Every civilization believes its wealth is infinite until it discovers that wealth is trust, and trust has a breaking point. Rome learned it, Spain learned it, and if we're honest, we may be learning it again today. This is the story of how the world's greatest empires taxed themselves to death, and how the lesson keeps coming back, century after century. Rome was not built in a day, but it was taxed every single one of them. At its height, Rome stretched across 3 continents, fed 60 million people, and spent more on armies and monuments than the rest of the ancient world combined. But conquest is expensive, and maintaining an empire is even more so. To feed the beast, emperors taxed everything. Land, grain, salt, slaves, trade, inheritance, even urine. Yes, urine. When Emperor Vespasian needed revenue, he taxed public toilets. His son complained and the emperor famously held up a coin and asked, "Does it smell bad?" It didn't, and the tax stayed. For a while, Rome could afford it. New conquests brought new plunder, and money flowed like water. But when expansion stopped, the math broke. Revenues flatlined, costs kept rising, so emperors turned to the oldest political trick. They debased the money. Silver coins were mixed with cheaper metals. Taxes rose, but value fell. Inflation spread. Merchants stopped accepting coins. Citizens hoarded gold. And soon the government began collecting taxes in grain, livestock, and cloth. Because money itself was no longer trusted. The empire didn't collapse from invasion. It collapsed from exhaustion. Every new tax bought less stability. Every decree eroded more trust, until there was nothing left to tax but the ruins. You cannot tax your way out of decay. 1,000 years later, Spain became the richest empire in history, at least on paper. Conquistadors brought mountains of silver and gold from the New World. Galleons arrived in Europe heavy with treasure, and the Spanish crown spent it all. Wars, cathedrals, palaces, a golden empire financed by conquest. But easy money breeds easy waste. When the gold shipments slowed, Spain borrowed. When debt piled up, it taxed. When taxes weren't enough, it borrowed again. By the 1600s, Spain had defaulted 6 times. Inflation devoured the silver economy. Prices rose faster than wages, and peasants paid for royal debts they never made. In some years, over half of all Spain's tax revenue went just to pay interest. The empire that owned half the world was, in truth, owned by its creditors. By the 18th century, the Golden Empire was bankrupt, not from lack of wealth, but from the belief that endless extraction equals power. You can't tax prosperity into existence, but you can tax trust out of it. Across the Mediterranean, another empire watched its own decline, the Ottomans. When wars and corruption drained the treasury, the sultans didn't cut spending, they sold tax rights to private collectors. These collectors squeezed the provinces dry, skimming profits and bribing officials. Peasants fled their land, trade routes emptied, the empire turned inward, and the same state that had once connected 3 continents slowly suffocated under its own bureaucracy. The Ottomans didn't fall to invaders. They fell to a tax system that ate its own people. If this sounds ancient, it shouldn't, because every modern government runs on the same logic, just with digital tools. They don't raise legions, they raise deficits. They don't melt silver, they print money. And every crisis brings the same promise. This tax is temporary. The U.S. income tax was born in wartime, a temporary measure. Britain's VAT, a short-term fix. Most have never disappeared. Modern states call it monetary policy, but in practice it's the same playbook. Borrow, spend, print, repeat. And when citizens start to question it, leaders reach for moral justifications. to protect the economy, to fight inequality, to save the planet. Each cause may be noble, but the math never changes. More spending, fewer producers, smaller trust. The ancient emperors would be proud. We've made taxation invisible, hidden inside inflation and policy jargon. But the outcome is identical. The wealth moves upward and the trust moves out. Collapse doesn't start with empty coffers. It starts with empty belief. When people realize the system serves itself first, they adapt quietly. They hide wealth, move assets abroad, trade in private, or simply stop working as hard. The state still collects its taxes, but the soul of the economy, trust, is already gone. That's when decline becomes irreversible. You can legislate money. You can't legislate confidence. And every empire that forgets this signs its own death warrant. So what survives when taxation devours trust? Not the coins, not the paper, not the decrees. What endures is what cannot be printed, inflated, or confiscated. Land, skills, production, and the will to adapt. Rome had its farmers, Spain had its merchants. We have entrepreneurs, creators, and builders. History rewards those who create value when governments only create burdens. Because every empire eventually taxes itself to death. But individuals who learn faster build what comes next. Rome taxed itself to death. Spain borrowed itself to death. And the modern world is inflating itself to death. Different methods, same illusion, same ending. Because history doesn't repeat, but every time power believes it can take more, it rhymes louder. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and Money Lore will show you where to look.